Guys, what is going on? Nick Wood here, the king of digital real estate. Let's talk about how to pick the perfect city for your rank and rent property. It is genuinely the most important part. And there's a common thing that's said in physical real estate. It applies perfectly to digital real estate. And it's commonly said that the money is made in the buy, not the sell. I've heard this over and over and over again, and I never quite understood it. But essentially what that means is, let's just say you are going to buy a duplex, right? The duplex is $500,000. That's what it's worth. But let's say that the current owner is going through marital problems, getting a divorce, and they need to offload it immediately, get the cash, whatever. You go in, you offer $450,000 cash so you can wrap up the deal quickly, and the owner says, okay, let's do it. Well, you just basically bought $50,000 of equity. You inherited $50,000 of equity because you can turn around tomorrow, list it for $500,000 and make $50,000 because you bought correctly. What does this have to do with digital real estate, with rank and rent, with all of this other stuff, and picking a city? It has everything to do with it. I made the mistake early on in my rank and rent career, of not taking the time to pick the correct city. And not even that, but not following the correct advice of how to pick the right city, because I was following advice from people that were not in the business. They were teaching the business model, but they were not in the business. They had been out of the business for years and they had lost touch with what a good city looks like. But I want to give you one more example of how important this is. I recently invested into a syndicate. This is in the United States and it's a friend of mine. They had this property in Dallas. And I said to the guy that was doing this, I said, I'm in. And I said, how did you find a deal? And it was like a 7 cap in Dallas. What's your strategy? How do you find deals? He's like, that's the secret sauce. He's like, what you don't know is that we went through 200 or 300 deals to find that deal. They went through 200 to 300 deals to find the one deal that was worth it. And some of you guys are hopping in, you're thinking of the first city that you visited, or the first city that you'd like to go visit, or the first city that comes to mind, or you open up the map and you just pick a random city and it's like, oh, it looks kind of good and it's less than $5 because Nick said less than $5, and you're just going into it. And then what happens is you find out that there's not enough leads, or you find out that it's actually a higher CPC, or there's not any hungry business owners, or the worst is you land the deal and you can never rank the site, and therefore you can never capture that full profit margin that makes this business model so freaking sexy. A lot of this comes from just practice, guys. I have done over 1,000 niche and city combinations, and that is why I know when I see a good city, I just know because I've done it so many times. So I want to give you a couple of rules of thumb for me of how I pick cities for rank and rent. Again, these are general rules, and this is an art, not a science. That's why my free Facebook group is called The Art of Pre-Selling, because it's not an exact science, but these are general rules that I follow. So rule number 1 is they're typically less than 100,000 population. Now, I'm not a big population guy. I don't care. But as I look at all my properties, all my projects, most of them are under 100,000. And I made the mistake of worrying too much about population in the beginning. It's not about population. It is about demand. Now, the only reason I want to mention this is because I was led to believe when I got into this business model that you needed to find some crazy niche, that you needed to find some very obscure, wild niche nobody has ever thought of. And that was how you made money. And I believe that's a really good way to make money. But what happens is by trying to test all these different niches, you spend a lot of money, you spend a lot of time, and you can get discouraged. And so after a couple of years of trying this niche and trying this niche and trying this niche and not really finding any that were that good, I started going, what if the actual answer, where the money's actually at, is in picking the right city? What if it's not necessarily in the niches, but they're in the cities, in finding out how to pick a correct city? That was the thought process. And so what I've noticed, most of the cities that I go into are less than 100,000 population. Not always, but what you find is typically the lower the population, the lower the competition. Not always. So I will say, as a general rule, I try to look at cities. What cities are there between 30, 40, 50,000 and 100,000? That's kind of where I start. And then I look to see, and this goes into rule number 2, is I make sure that the city niche combination has adequate search volume. Now, what do I mean by that? Is it has to have enough searches so that if I do rank, I'm going to get enough leads that I can justify charging $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, $5,000 per month. Now, everyone goes, well, how do you do that? Well, in a nutshell, you can't trust any of the tools. So if you think that going into SEMrush or any of the other tools and typing in concrete Las Vegas is the answer, it's not. because you're going to get very skewed results and you cannot trust those tools. However, I use tools as benchmarks. I use tools to compare. So here's kind of what I do is I go and I look at a property that either I own or a friend of mine owns that has been ranking for a while. It's ranking in the maps, it's ranking in the organic results, and it's ranking for almost all the main keywords. And it's not running ads, right? I want to just know how many organic leads are there. So what I'll do is I'll go and I'll say, okay, let me look at the data for the last 3 to 6 months on that site that's not running ads, it's ranked organically for the main terms. And if that's one of my projects, it's getting 50 leads per month. I'm like, okay. So now I go into that same tool, let's say it's SEMrush, I type in, let's say Las Vegas concrete, and it's Las Vegas concrete, that term or some of those related terms says that there's only 10 people searching, which wouldn't be the case, but if there were, right? But then what I look at is I go, okay, what this is telling me is that based on the actual data of how many leads this site's getting ranked number 1 in that city, I could assume that anything that this tool says, if it says 10, I could assume it's probably closer to 50. I could multiply it by 5 and I could kind of make a guesstimate of what amount of leads there are. And so that is how I do it. It's all ratios, it's all comparisons, but guys, there has to be enough leads to justify going in. And what I see people commonly do is they go into cities, they don't have enough leads. They're ranking, they're like, I'm ranking number 1, I'm ranking in the maps, but I'm not getting enough leads and I can't sell this project because it's only generating 10 leads and I'm the number 1 person. So you have to make sure there's adequate search volume. And that is how I do it, is go into a project, look at a project that you own or a friend owns, get a baseline for that tool, and then use your head, use your intuition, okay? And then number 3 is I make sure that there are people that are running ads in those cities that I want to go into. So if I go into Tuscaloosa duct cleaning, I don't know the population, but let's say the population is less than 100,000, which I don't necessarily care as much about, but that is a good starting point, has good search volume. And then I go, okay, are there people running ads? And the reason why I make sure there's people running ads is if there are not people running ads, I don't know if there's hungry business owners. And my rule of thumb is that if I'm going to go into a city, I don't want to have to convince business owners that they should be spending money on advertising. I want to go and talk to people who are already spending money on advertising, whether with Google Ads, whether it's HomeAdvisor, Angie's Leads, etc. Those people I want to talk to because they're already sold on the idea of advertising, the idea of paying for leads. Now I just have to convince them to spend money with me. So half the equation is already taken out. So I make sure there's at least a few 3 to 5 business owners running Google Ads because those are the easiest ones to sell to. Sometimes I'll still go in if there's only HomeAdvisor people or, Angie's Leads, etc. Lastly, I want to add this. When I am looking at a city, I also, as a last note, make sure that it's low competition. I make sure that I am going to be able to rank that website in 4 to 6 months. I don't want to wait 12 months. I don't want to wait 18 months. I don't want to wait 9 months. I want to be able to, once I get the deal, use that money to build the property, start doing SEO, do good content, do good on-page SEO, start doing some backlinks, and get that thing ranked in 4 to 6 months, because that is where the magic of this business model comes into play. Is once your website ranks, now you're getting the leads that you were getting from ads. You can shut the ads off, and that money that you're spending on ads goes right into your pocket because you're still getting those leads, but now they're free because they're organic. So I make sure that it's low competition. Now, what is low competition? What are the telltale signs of low competition? How do you know if it's low competition? A tip I'll give you, make sure when you are looking if it's low competition that you're looking at multiple keywords. Don't just go look at a city and type in concrete Tuscaloosa and it looks like it's wide open and go, okay, let's send it. Because guess what? The other 4 to 10 terms that you want to rank for, concrete contractor, concrete patio, concrete whatever, they may be highly competitive and you're going to get your ass handed to you. On the flip side, you could go and you could look at one term, let's say concrete Tuscaloosa. It looks highly competitive. You decide not to go into it. But if you were to look at the next 4 to 7 or to 10 terms, all of them are low competition and you missed a huge opportunity because you only looked at one keyword. My tip on that, on making sure it's low competition, use at least 5 of the main keywords for that niche. And again, that leads to more questions. Well, how do you build keyword lists, etc.? These are all things that I cover in my program, Digital Landlords. I cover and touch on some of these things on this channel, also in the free Facebook group. If you're not in there, check it out. Guys, this is how I pick cities. This is the overall 20,000 foot view of how I pick cities. I've been doing it this way. I've been refining, I've been tweaking, I've been testing. I've made the mistakes, man. I've went into the city where I thought, yes, everything lines up, and it doesn't. I've also gone into cities where I said, okay, this is probably too competitive, but I am willing to test it, and I was able to rank. And so the reason that I have these rules and the reason I know what I know is from testing, from trying, from doing. Nothing that I'm going to share on this channel is going to be from theory. It's all going to be from experience. That is how I pick a city, and I hope that helps. If you have any questions, drop it in the comments. I can clarify there. I'll see you guys soon.